Good evening and good voch and Modim Simcha, everyone. It's Shabbos, learn Sichos Haran and Sipurey Baal Shem Tov and other tzaddikim. So we start with some sayings from the Baal Shem Tov. Baal Shem Tov HaKodesh said that throughout all the madregas and the asagas that he was able to achieve in Avodas Hashem, he said he never used them. He says he only used simple Pashut Emunah. He says even though it says that only a fool believes everything, Baal Shem Tov says he's willing to be considered a fool because petty, because Shver P'sayim Hashem. Then we have, he said, Tzadik v'emunos ha'yichya. Anybody who believes in Hashgacha Pratis, Hashem Yisborach knows that everything that the person goes through comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Big thing and a small thing. And that's the reason for a person's sin. And immediately he regrets and he becomes full of fear from Hashem. Immediately he's being forgiven because he believes that everything that happened to a person, everything that happened to him is from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And it's a reason for his sin. And that's why when he believes that even the reason to his sin also came from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, except I didn't understand what HaKadosh Baruch Hu was meaning. And I took it into a bad place. Since he believes that everything comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and he makes tshuva, it becomes to him a kapara. But Hashem Tov said that when a wagon goes filled with straw, and one strand of straw falls off on the back of the wagon, is they announce Mishamayim at exactly the right spot upon which that single piece of straw will fall. And the same thing applies when a leaf falls off a tree, because it is decreed on every single leaf what time it'll fall off the tree and which is the place that it'll fall. And sometimes, because one time, a Baal Shem Tov, it's a very famous story, the Baal Shem Tov showed one of his Talmidim that a leaf falls on the ground, and he ordered them to lift up that particular leaf, and they saw that there's a worm that was crawling underneath it. Baal Shem HaKadosh says that particular worm was suffering from the heat. So Mishamayim, the leaf fell upon it, provided with shade. And Rabbi Yonah said that the main thing is emunah, that as long that a person does not have emunah, he cannot be delivered. He cannot get the Yeshua. And if the person has emunah and he is certain that Mishamayim he will be delivered, he will be saved, the Yeshua is Mishamayim, it's dependent only in the emunah of a person on the HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And this is what he said, we spoke about it in quite a few shurim. Hashem Tov said that when a person cries out to HaKadosh Baruch Hu from the depth of his heart, that reveals the moichin, the chochmah bina das, and the emunah becomes stronger, because the emunah depends on the mouth. If a person falls dead from the emunah, chas v'shalom, the eitzah for that the person will speak explicitly about emunah. I believe in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and with that, his mind will be filled with emunah. Because saf maaseh machshav tchila. Whatever it is that the mouth says, always has to start with a machshava. But it's not just that what we think ends up being what we say, but it works the other way around. Whatever it is that we say ends up being what we think, what we believe. So when a person has a problem with Emunah, when he speaks Emunah, it fixes the Emunah in his mind. And now we will go to the second Maisa of Tzadikim, and this is a Maisa of the king that went every single year in all his country. In every single town, they would honor him, in a great deal. And in one specific town, there was a minhag that the Jews would take all the Sefer Torahs and out of Shul, out of Aron Kodesh, and they would go out of the Shul before him. And he liked it a lot, and he did them all kinds of favors and good deeds. And then the Jews sort of thought about it and figured out, it's really Chilul Hashem, or you're taking Sefer Torah. It's a big inyan to take Sefer Torah of the Besmedrash. So what they did was they made fake Sefer Torah. They took Etz Chaim and they wrapped it up with rags and pieces of paper, and they put on top of it, a coat of a Sefer Torah. And it looked like Sefer Torah. Every time that the king would come, they would put, the fake Sefer Torahs in the Aron, and the real Sefer Torah they put away. When the king came to town, everybody saw that they took from the Sefer Torah, they go with this towards the king, and it was all fake Sefer Torah. And of course, it was a secret. And there was one Rasha. It was a Ben Blial. He was a Moser. He was a snitch. And one time, the people of town made him mad, so he went to the king and he told him that really he's being faked out. He's being cheated. Every time the Rasha call, come and they hear that the king is coming, they're ordering the Shabbos of the Beis HaKnesses, tell him what's the time that the king comes, that he will take the Sefer Torah and they put him away, and put the fake one, instead of them. And this is what they go out before it from the king. And this is what they do every single time the king is there. Well, as you can imagine, the king did not like this very, very much. In fact, he became very angry. But he says, just to lash out without evidence, he didn't want to do. So he went and he traveled there, an earlier time. And when they heard that he's coming, the Shamash did the same thing. He took the Sefer Torah, put the fake Sefer Torah, and at night, Baal Chaloimus, I don't know who Novi, whoever came to him and told him, don't you imagine that what you see now is just a mere dream. Immediately go to the shul and put the real Sefer Torah in place, and the fake ones put in a place that nobody will know. And if you will not listen to me, then you will be responsible for the annihilation of all the Jews in town in one day. And the dream mamish woke him up. Thomas Arizl went and he did whatever he told him in the dream. He didn't tell anybody. When the king came, okay, so all the Balabati went to shul, they took Sefer Torah, they went to him. So the king told him, thank you very much for honoring them with this. He says, but I want you to take off the coats of Sefer Torah so that everybody can see with their own eyes the honor that he's giving. Well, you can understand that those Jews freaked out. I mean, they really freaked out. They didn't know what the Shabbos did at night. They thought that they were holding fake Sefer Torah. So the king ordered the army man, his guard, to take off the coats of the Torah, and they did it. And they all saw that this was the real Sefer Torah. And the Jews were, like they were blown away by this miracle that happened to them. Afterwards, they found out what the true Mesa was. And the Melech told the Jews this Russia, this wicked person, he went and told you that you're shaming me and you're taking out, for shmatat fake Sefer Torah, and I really wanted, to take a very strong revenge, if it even would be right. Now I see, that he was just lying. It was just fake news. So I'm giving you into your hands. You would do to him the way he figured to do to you. And they all, caught him, and they stepped on him, because the in of a Moser, this is somebody who tells, puts Jews in the hand of Goyim, so the Goyim can hurt them. It's the only case where there is exadin mavis, there is death sentence. It can be executed these days as well. And they step him on his legs, and it's kind of avod v'shoyim rino, Yom Tov v'simcha, thanking to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's a big story, because you see here that where the right to switch a Sefer Torah, whatever it is, it's a whole Indian all its own. Let's learn a little bit from the biography of Arizl. So we are talking about the city of Tzfas. By the time that Arizl came. So we're talking about a few of the famous Torah tzaddikim that made an indelible reshim on the Jewish legacy. So we'll talk about a few of them. The first one was known as the tzaddik of the roosters. His name was Rabbi Yossi Saragosi. He was one of the people who were expelled from Sicily. First, he stayed in Egypt, and he established a big yeshiva. In that yeshiva, the Radvaz, Rab David ben Zimra, that later on was, obviously the Radvaz is, and he was his big student was Arizl, learned by him. And then he made Aliyah from Egypt, and he stayed in Tzfas, and there he sat and he learned Kabbalah, and he was one of the few people zecher to Gilul Liyah at a certain place. Besides his greatness in Torah, he was very famous in his Midah Shel Aaron HaKohen. He was famous as somebody who would make peace between Odom and Chaverin, and Odom Ishtoi, and he settled conflicts not just because between the Jews and Tzfas, even the Muslims there would come to him when they had a dispute, because they trusted the Jewish sage that will judge them a mishpat tzedek. Before he passed away, he ordered the people he should be buried the same place that he was zecher to Gilul Liyah Zochor Latov, and that's what they did. And his grave is in Kfar En Zeisim, very close to the tzin of the Tana Rabbi Yehuda Bar Ilai. And he was a very, very holy person. He was Meluman Ben Nisim, a miracle worker, and because of them, he was called different kind of monikers, and the moniker of the tzaddik of the roosters he got because of something that happened after he passed away. The governor of Tzfas, that particular, the Ottoman government governor, was a bad person, an anti-Semite, as is so frequent during our history. And he wanted to, to find some kind of an excuse to chep it with the Jews of the town. And he decreed upon them to bring him an immense number of white roosters. Now, he knew that this number of white roosters, would not be available in the area. The roosters, they today, they whatever it is, most of them are white or whatever it is, but these are wild grown chicken, whatever it is that they. So some of them are white, but most of them, all black, brown, whatever it is. So he knew that they wouldn't be able to do it, and he'll be able to do whatever he wanted with them. Well, the Jews first were obviously very distressed, and they called that Tzara in the Knesses, and they called the Kodesh Baruch Hu, pouring their heart like water in tefillah, the tshuah and deliverance. They went to Shetech Kibbutz Tzadikim, they're close to town, and they davened that the Schus would protect them. And when they came back to town, Rabbi Yosef Saragosi, who had already passed away, came back in a dream to the head of the Kehillah, Rosh HaKol, and he told them, listen, HaKadosh Baruch Hu has heard your cry, and especially those who came to his kever. And he's asking that the Jews of Tzfas will take a few hundreds of roosters, whatever color, it doesn't matter, any color, whatever it is, just bring them all and to a specific place, and he will perform a miracle for them. So the Rosh HaKol told his dream to his brothers, and they didn't take long. Immediately they went all over the place. They started gathering the roosters, all the colors, until they went to one place. And it actually happened, all those colorful birds, actually the brown, the black, the red ones, the yellow ones, all became white at once. And the Jew of Tzfas brought all this, this cackling bunch of roosters to the house of the governor. Rosh Kehillah stood there, says that his demand was fulfilled. And here's in the yard were hundreds and hundreds of white roosters, the way that he demanded from them. And when he saw it, he immediately understood that this is not a natural thing. There was some kind of a miracle that happened here. And you realize, that he better not fool around with this kind of thing. And he changed his heart for them, for good, from that moment on. And he decided, listen, to start up with the Jews would be, sorry, just one second. It's likely to be a bad move. There are miracles going on with it, whatever it is, let me stay away from this. And from that time on, Rabbi Yosef Saragosi, Zechet Tzadik Rosh got the moniker of the tzaddik of the roosters, of the Ternegolim. And some they call him Rabbi Yosef Alovon, the white Rabbi Yosef, because of the whiteness of the roosters. And the shul where he learned in daven while he was alive, it's actually standing until today. It's called by the Jews in Tzfas the name the shul of Rabbi Yosef Alovon, of the white Rabbi Yosef. After Rabbi Yosef Saragosi, he was the Rav of Tzfas, and after he passed away, the Rabbi of Tzfas was Rabbi Yosef Yaakov Beirav. He was one of the people that were driven away from Spain. At age 18, when he came to Morocco, was already known as a Torah, as a sage, a Godel B'Torah in Yerushalayim, and the congregation of Fes in Morocco accepted him with great simcha, and he became the rabbi. He was just age 18. You can imagine what kind of a prodigy he was. And he was still a Baruch, was in a town with thousands of people. And after a while, Rabbi Yaakov came to Egypt, he stayed there, had a lot of Talmidim until it came time for him to go to Tzfas. When he was at Tzfas, he had a thought to be mechadish the smicha. The smicha means that giving the rabbanim the koyach and the authority. Those that are Bekim B'Torah to judge and paskin with specific dinim, like din nefashos, capital punishments and knoses and fines, kiddush chodesh by sight, and the Indian, to punish Torah, somebody that is chayiv malchus, has to be spanked. The ability to sit in judgment for these kind of things is given only to dayanim smuchim, which are ordained. The smicha, in other words, they were ordained by the dayanim of the previous generation, and those from generation before them, and so forth, all the way back until Moshe Rabbeinu alav shalom. However, during the time of the Romans in Eretz Yisrael, it was all the Rabbanim of Israel who were smuchim, were all killed, and the chain of smicha was cut off, and therefore the dayanim no longer have the authority to judge and sit in judgment in trial of these inyanim. Now, Rabbi Yaakov Berav have learned and understood from the words of the Rambam that there is a possibility to reordain dayanim, to be samech dayanim, even somebody who is not being nismach from previous generation, bitnai, in one condition, that all the Gdolei Torah in Eretz Yisrael, the rabbis, the dayanim, everybody is maskim and support in this process of smicha. And if they do, if all of them decide to do it, they'll be able to renew the smicha of the Yonim in Eretz Yisrael, and maybe even to put together Sanhedrin. Rabbi Yaakov Berav, made this idea known, and the Rabbanim in Eretz Kodesh, set to learn the sugya. And the Rav Yerushalayim is Rav Levi ben Chaviv, the Ralbach. He got up and he put all his weight against this kavanah. He was totally against it. And his asagas, the Rabach, was a great, great yid. And his asagas were accepted. And the idea of renewing the smicha was put away. In Tzfas, Rabbi Yaakov Berav had very, very important talmidim, and 4 of them he has ordained, the regular smicha like we have today, to judge the halacha. From these 4, B'ezrat Hashem, we'll talk about them next week, but from these 4, the 4 famous ones is Rabbi Yosef Kara, who the Mechaber Shulchan Aruch, Rabbi Moshe Mitrani, the old Moshe Mitrani, all the yeshiva in Tzfas, when many Talmidim came to the Torah, and he wrote the Sforim Kiryas Sefer on the Rambam, Beis Elokim, the Inyone Emunah, and his answers, responses to people who were inquiring with questions from all around the world, his name was Shutam Abit, very famous. And then there's Rabbi Elazar Azkari. He is Baal Sefer Haredim, the famous Sefer Haredim. There's full divrei Musar, can learn the greatness and the holiness of the Mechaber. Sefer Haredim counts down the mitzvahs the way that it fits according to the limbs of a person's body. And the Rav Chida writes about him in the Sefer Shem Gedolim, where we heard from his Kedusha and miracles that were done with him in the city of Istanbul. Ad Khan from the biography of Rabbeinu Arizl. And before we go weiter to the Sichos Haran of this week, I wanted to touch on something new It's also an Indian to speak Motzei Shabbos of the greatness of the Rebbe Elimelech of Nizhensk. So it's again Aleinu that it's a big thing, Givaldiga week for people who listen and go to tell mices about him. In the Sefer Avas Shalom, Tanina, it said the Rav Kodesh, Marino Elimelech, they said in Sefer Noam Elimelech that he was a Talmud to the great tree, the Maggid from Mizrich, and after the Maggid from Mizrich passed away, most of the people of the Talmidim went to the Rebbe Elimelech, and they came to him to the very Lukim Chaim. He says nobody can give voice to the sanctity and the precious. While he was still a boy, he was still a young man. And he and his brother Kodesh Rav Zusha from Anipoli, they took, they went from town to town to Profen Golos, to purify the Jewish hearts and put Yeshamayim in them. His holy Talmud, Ramach Mendel from Prostik, he testified before the Degel Machne Ephraim, the great Degel Machne. He's Rabbi Nachman's uncle. It says, I saw my holy teacher from Nizhensk. Every single day he would reflect in the greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and all his bones were knocking to one another, and tremendous fear was held him, and you can see his entire body shaking from the fear of Hashem and the splendor of Hashem's greatness. He says, and all his sinews, and it says everything became like, in his veins will look like, his face would change. And he says, and under the person's ear there is one single blood vessel that I was makabel from my teacher, that particular blood vessel is never changes from anything except during the last day of a person on this earth. And he says, and I saw that blood vessels too was shaking by my teacher, Rebbe Elimelech, every single day from the fear of the greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And in the Sefer Tefillah LeMoshe, when Moshe was Sambo, he brings that he heard from Rav HaKodesh, his son, the son of Rebbe Elimelech, Rebbe Lozo. He is the son of Rebbe Elimelech. He asked him about his father and what did he order, what were the things that he said before he passed away. He answered him, if you want to know what was the last will and testament of my father, you should take his Sefer, the Noam Elimelech, because 22 years before he passed, he said these words in his Sefer, and I know that every single day he would make it as a last will and testament, as if that day was the day before he was leaving the world. That was the Madrig of Yir Shamayim, of Moreno Rabbeinu, Noam Elimelech Schuso, again later. And now, let's take a quick look at the Sichos Haran for this week. And here we go. All right. Today is Sicha number 173. I heard from some people that he told Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon was the first, this is about Rabbi Nachman. Rabbi Shimon was the first person who became his chassid when Rabbi Nachman was 13 years old. The day when he got married, he spoke with some people, with some young people, and he saw they were not interested in the Avodas Hashem. So he let them go. And then he started speaking with Reb Shimon The same kind of things, like as if he's not very interested in Avodas Hashem. Reb Shimon suddenly said, I'm not into this. This is not interesting. I'm a simple Jew. He says, all I want is Avodas Hashem. Rabbi Nachman told him, it seems to me that we're going to have a lot to do with one another. And he started speaking about Yir Shemaim, and Reb Shimon was so awestruck that he said, I know that you're going to be a great Rebbe, and I want to be your neshamish. I want to be the one who serves you. And that's the way it was. And it happened to that Reb Shimon passed over the border, that he has actually stayed there a few years and didn't see Rabbeinu about 3 years, because something that happened in the city of Medvedevke, that Rabbi Nachman was upset about him about something. He says, I'm not exactly sure what this ma'aseh was. But because of whatever this happened, Rabbeinu told him, I want to send you over the river Don. We're talking about Don, the Volga and the Don. So he sent him beyond the Don River. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu made it so that he went for business, whatever it is, went to town, and Reb Shimon went around the Nahal, Don, around the time of the Don River. There's about 100 miles or more. Actually, a parsa is 4 miles. It's like 400 miles, from Medvedevke, and that's the main Russia. This is actually Russia. That's not Ukraine. And Jews, you can't find Jews in just like 1 in 1,000, especially a few years before. And Reb Shimon went there just, temporarily for business. And so it happened that what Rabbeinu said came true, and he had to stay there for a few years. He says, and everything that happened to him during these years, it's not possible to say it all and to explain it all, because he was living there amongst the Goyim for a few years, and he had a few nisyonos when he was there. And during those years that Reb Shimon was there, Rabbeinu Zichron Brocha left Medvedevke from Zlatipolia and put his apartment in Breslov. Now, the way that Reb Shimon, the story that how Reb Shimon actually finished his galus was that he was there was a guy that tried to seduce him, and he refused to listen to her, and she kept on pegging him in and cornering him to the point where he was in her room, and she blocked she didn't let him go out unless he does whatever he does. And he took a knife and cut his own lips until his lips were bleeding. And when she saw that, he said, okay, this guy is nuts, and left him and let him go. And from then on, then he was able to come back. He said Reb Shimon had a few nisyonos during these years, and Rabbeinu was already in Breslov already a couple of years, and afterwards Reb Shimon came to him. So when he came to him, he fell on his legs and he was crying. So Rabbeinu told him, you should know that the same difference that it was by me from the day that I was born until the day that you left me, there's the same difference between the day that you left until today. In other words, he kept on going from one madrega and another and another and another, high upon high upon high upon high. All those years for tremendous amount of madregas, until there's the same difference between the time that he was born until that time. Anybody who has a shtickle seichel can understand what it is, from the greatness of Rabbeinu Zichron Bracha, because the time when Reb Shimon left him, when Rabbeinu was already in Eretz Yisrael, and everything that happened to him in Eretz Yisrael, and all the greatness, all the mercy, whatever it is that he was, that kind of fasogas. We have Likutim Haran from there. That there's never been heard such terrors. And this was before you went to Israel. After Israel, Bichlal, and they went to him, before he went to Israel, until he came back, Shalom, and was masik there, whatever it is. And he said that everything that he was able to attain before he came to Eretz Yisrael, he was embarrassed by it. He didn't want these Torahs even to be included around in the Kutim Haran. Maybe like I think there's a couple of Torahs that are from the things that he said before he went to Eretz Yisrael. And he says this Torah for him I consider like nothing. He's very embarrassed from them. And still he went up and up and higher. And when Reb Shimon left him, it was already a few years after he came from Eretz Yisrael. So come and stand and see and watch what Madrega and Malo Rabbeinu stood. Reb Shimon left him for 3 years. And he said it's exponentially greater than ever he was. He says there's chiluk in his asog and his attainment when Reb Shimon left him, the way that there was between the day he was born until the day that Shimon left. The main nekuda that we need to take from this particular sikha first of all, that the Inyan of all the tzaddikim, especially, tzaddikim like the Baal Shem Tov, like Rabbeinu Zal, Arizl, and these tzaddikim do not stop. He said all the other tzaddikim, they reach a certain madrega, and that's it. They're holding this madrega. But Kenan Ahora, the tremendous tzaddikim, I'm not chas v'chalil believing in them. It's the difference between these kind of tzaddikim is that they keep on going up and up and up non-stop. Non-stop. And Nosson explains this in Likutei Halachos, but Hashem will talk about it sometime, but he says that there is the kavana of tefillin, the basic kavanas Arizl of when you put on tefillin, the tefillin shel yad, the basic kavana is the name Eke, Aleph K Yud K, and then the name Havaya, which is Yud K Vav K, and then the name Aleph Dal Nun Yud, which is the way that we mention the name of Hashem. And the Kavonas Arizal to the Tefillin Shel Rosh, when you put it in your head, is the name Eke, Aleph K Yud K, and then the name of Vaya, Yud K Vav K, and then name Eke again, Aleph K Yud K again. Now, what's the difference between this and that? What does this mean? What does that mean? As we said before, the whole idea is to take the Kavonas Arizal and all the teaching of Arizal and to find out what does it mean for us in our day-to-day living. The answer is as follows. The Tefillin Shel Yad is the beginning of the ascension. This is the derech of the regular people of the world, the tzaddikim of this world. It starts with a yearning. A yearning is the name Eke. When you say the name Eke is a conjugation of to be, and it will be when you want to tell somebody, listen, I'm going to be at a certain place at a certain time. You say, Ani yesham b'sha'ah zot v'zot. I'm going to be there at that particular time. So the name of Eke means a name of something. He says that you are preparing a certain existence for yourself in the future. In Torah Rabbeinu explains, and that's a name of tshuva. Because before a person does tshuva, it would have been better for him not to have been born at all. Once he does tshuva, then he's worthy for him to have been born, and therefore, that name is extremely important for him, and it means that this is the yearning the person has to Kadosh Baruch Hu. It starts with a yearning. Then, when you yearn to Kadosh Baruch Hu, you get an illumination. Illumination is represented by the name Vaya Baruch Hu of Yud Kei Vav Kei. Hashem illuminates you according to the yearnings that you brought to the table. And then when you're done, when the illumination is there, the light is being taken away, and what you're left is just with an imprint of the light that was in you. You're left with the emunah, you have seen it. You don't see it anymore. It doesn't shine to you anymore, but it was there. And you remember it was there. And it left an imprint. And that imprint is what you're building on, your next step in Avodas Hashem. The Tefillah Shel Rosh already represents the Avodas Hashem of the great tzaddikim. What happens to them is that they start with Ekel like everybody, and they get Havaya, they get illumination like everybody. But instead of enjoying the light, as it were, until the light is being taken away, they already remove the light by themselves and they yearn all over again. It doesn't become, Eke Avaya Adnut. It becomes Eke Avaya. They take away the Avaya and they go with Eke all over again. In other words, HaKadosh Baruch Hu illuminated to me. I know he did, but it was only according to the madrega that I brought to the table, according to the kind of longing that I brought to the table. That's not HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I mean, yes, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, according to the madrega that was, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is much greater than that. So they yearn all over again. That's a madrega of the great tzaddikim. And when the tzaddikim keep on working, they keep on toiling, they keep on forcing the issue again and again and again. When they grow exponentially. And because when we're talking here, it's not the kind of learning that you learn in university, that you know another thing, you have another experience, you know this, you read that book, whatever it is, and you know a little bit more. But we're talking about here is spiritual and Torah attainment that a person gets by getting the chomer, getting the body off, getting the gashmius of the body off the scene. But what's actually is left is just the neshama. The body is a tenuous kesher between the neshama and the body, a little bit of a kesher. And that particular kesher is, as long as the tzaddik is in this world, he uses his body. But the thing is, it's very, very very little left, of it. And when the neshama is the neshama is a chelek elokam imal. It's a part of Hashem. So the sog of the neshama is infinite. In other words, the saga of the tzaddik is commensurate with the degree to which he took off the gashmis for himself. The more gashmis he took off, the bigger the saga that you get. That's what Chazal said. Until you are begging for divrei Torah to come into your heart, be'er Kodesh Baruch Hu, that the delicacies will not get into your belly. Because when you take off the gashmius, the ruchnius grows exponentially. Exclusive of all these gevaldik tzaddikim will protect us all, will bless us all with gevaldige week and gevaldige me'adim l'simcha, gevaldige Pesach b'zat Hashem, and b'zat Hashem, tonight is Tiferes Shebechesed, should be mashpia teribas, b'zat Hashem will be zoiche. To see Mashiach in Bias Mashiach Tzidkeinu, that Hashem very soon in nowadays, only. So the next time I understand the shir will be with Hashem on Monday night, when we will learn with Hashem Sipurey Baal Shem Tov, the story of the master of prayer, Bli Neder. Kol Tov, and they have a very, very good evening.